So joined now by Maurice Brosnan and Sean O'Dupere to look back over the county final over the weekend where Moycullen ran out 1 point victors in the end. Sean, coming to you first, we were on even saying off air there, like we were produced really with a, I suppose, brilliant county final. Like you kind of have to accept in the conditions we have around this time of year that it's not going to be maybe cracking and free flowing at all times, but excitement wise and everything, Moycullen and Salthill definitely produced that.
Yeah, it was. I have to say, it was a good game. The result was in doubt up to the very last minute or last few seconds even. Obviously, people were interested in going to the final. I think there was about 6,000 people there. The game was held up for, I think, 10 minutes, or the throw-in was held up for 10 minutes, which kind of, I suppose, showed the the amount of interest that was in the game. People wanted to go and see it. I think it was maybe the third all Westboard final ever, I think, we'd say, in Galway. So, I suppose there was a novelty factor to that. Moycullen, on the one hand, when they won 2 years ago, there was nobody allowed to go to the game, so it made it extra special for them. For Salthill, then, even though they lost, looking back on their year, I would suggest that it has been a successful year for them. I suppose, given as well the average age of that squad that they have, which seems quite young. And I think if John O'Mahony is willing to stay on, I think the future is bright for them.
Yeah, no, so many positives really for both sides that you could take away from this county final, Mars.
I agree, Paul. Yeah, and probably I would actually say for the county, to be honest, you look at it's a very successful championship all around. I think revenue for gates broke 1 million. The attendances all year have been very strong. The games were streamed consistently, which I think is something that we really needed in Galway. And other counties, I think we'll actually be looking at that as an example now. You have other counties that didn't stream any of their games whatsoever in the county champ, so that's been a huge plus. Football wise, I thought given the conditions, it was entertaining. It probably was what you would expect from this time of the year, and particularly with the I don't know about you lads, but walking in with that absolute gale cutting you, you were whatever about standing in the sand, you couldn't really dreading trying to kick a ball in it. So I thought it was pleasing from both teams. It was very evident. I think that I saw Salthill from the very first second. It actually reminded me of the Armagh Donegal game this year. I don't know if you remember that, when Rian O'Neill lumped the ball in on top of Roy Grugan. But the seconds they won that throw, and they were determined, we're going to kick this ball in long, top of Tomo. They did the same thing about a minute later. So they came out and tried to dictate the terms and play football, and that's as much as you can hope for in given as we say, the conditions.
If you look at the goals, Sean Hogan, from both teams, there's obviously luck with the Salthill goal early on the start. Daniel O'Flaherty on 6 minutes, it's safe to say he was going for a point. Then Owen Gallagher launches a ball into the square, maybe a hit and hope, and Peter Cook's just there in the end of it. But for both sides, there was luck on their sides for the goals.
Oh yeah, there was. I think none of those two goals were part of any playbook for either team. Obviously, Daniel O'Flaherty was going for a point, and it just dipped in under the crossbar at the very last second. I suppose if you're being critical, the Moycullen goalie Paor, I mean, he possibly should have got to that. And then, if that was fortuitous, I think the Moycullen goal, and they'll probably admit this themselves, was very fortuitous. I mean, Owen Gallagher, I was reading in the paper today, I mean, he was obviously going for a point. He said that he just threw a leg at it. So it's like the ball then hanging in the air in I suppose, no man's land. Does Rory Lavelle, does he come out or does he stay on his line? I suppose he made the fateful decision to come out, even though there was 2 or 3 Salthill defenders going up with Peter Cook. And I'm sure we say during the week he's had nightmares about that decision. So once he committed to it, there was nobody on the line. And in actual fact, was it possibly an own goal, because I think, no, I don't know what Salthill defender.
I think it was
but I
Owen
think
Bealey, as far as I know.
possibly. I know he was in the vicinity, all right, but I think the last touch of the ball was from a defender, and that he roofed it into his own net. You know, I mean, I wouldn't blame him. You know, I mean, these things happen in you know, split seconds, but certainly, you know, it added to the excitement factor of the final, those two goals. But you know, I think Salthill, having played for, what was it, 60, 59 minutes, haven't played, you know, really, really well. You know, to let a goal like that in, I think would probably add to the disappointment on Sunday night. But, you know, you do need luck to win, you know, big titles, and Moycullen got their luck.
Did Moycullen get away with one, Mars? Because like I was just watching on the streaming service, and it was kind of hard to tell towards the end of that game where Salthill get a breakaway chance. I think the ball kind of falls to Carl Sweeney. It looks like Martin Flaherty's put up his hand to play
advantage, yeah.
And then he comes back, and I don't feel it's kind of been outlined enough, because like it seemed like such a big turning point, because Salthill really did have the numbers there.
Yeah, I agree with you. Yeah, I think you know, I don't know if it was on the stream. Actually, I watched the game back, but I didn't see after it. But John O'Mahony definitely went over to the referee after the game and seemed aggravated enough about a few things. Actually, there was maybe a free just before that as well that Salthill definitely took issue with. I think a lot of them are marginal, Paul, by and large. You know, something like, you know, I thought Brian Conlon was very harshly penalised in the start of the second half for playing the ball on the ground, or small stuff like that. Like that, to be honest, I find it hard to criticize the referee for that stuff. But I do think in a situation like that, that's a mistake. You have to play advantage in a situation like that. It's just, you know, because otherwise you're rewarding the cynical foul, not the cynical foul, but what it was trying to stop the flow of play. You know, what you see teams doing a lot now often is they're actually fouling higher up the field. I think partly because of the black card, maybe teams are just becoming smarter about it. Kerry actually, against Galway this year, were brilliant at it. You know, Kerry had 5 turnovers in the second half against Galway in the All-Ireland final in their own half. This is in Galway's half. Every single one of them ended in a Kerry foul. Like that's a deliberate. That's not a coincidence. That's happening deliberately. And if you don't punish that, or if you don't play advantage and allow teams to take advantage of that, that's why you get situations like that. So another example just from the intercounty year this year, you know, look at the only goal Kerry conceded in the championship this year was against Dublin. Where did that come from? A turnover high up the field. They tried to foul twice, but a brilliant referee played advantage both times, goes up the other end, and Scully puts it into the corner and gets the goal. So you have to, in situations like that, I think it's actually important for the flow of Gaelic football that you, in an attacking situation like that, play advantage. By and large, I thought, you know, it wasn't his best day, but I don't necessarily like talking about referees, but just that one particular incident, I thought you have to play advantage, because otherwise it has massive repercussions for the game that we want to see. Yeah,
it just feels like an occasion like that, maybe it's the county final occasion, I don't know, somewhat playing a factor, because like the advantage is there, like it should be played. It just doesn't make sense, I suppose, to kind of go back to it. And like, as you've seen, when Rory Lavelle took that free towards the end, like it was a
way outside shooting range,
kick, like Mars.
Yeah, it was way outside shooting range, and that's the point, Paul. You know, I don't think you make that foul if you're let it on a plate for Tom O'Connor or Robert Finnerty. The point is that you in the game, you weigh it up and you make your assessment. But I just, you know, again, not that I would be overly critical or anything like that, but I just think a situation like that is actually important for Gaelic football. That what we want to see is an attacking situation that rewarded. And in a situation like that, I just think you have to play advantage. I can understand why it happens. You know, the crowd was a fever pitch at the moment. There was, I think he'd booked the 2 boys with the Peter Cook incident off the ball before that as well, and maybe that was all weighing in his mind, and there was a chance to catch a breath in early. But I just think in a situation like that, you just, you know, let it play out for another 5 seconds and see how it goes.
Was it one that you felt Sean Moycullen kind of got away with?
Possibly. No, at the time, like when the free was given, I thought Rory Lavelle, I thought that was within his range. You know, he has a nice strike of the ball. You know, it's kind of like a 2-3 iron. He didn't catch it well at all, and it's kind of, you know, it didn't even, you know, get to the end line. But you know, I suppose we can't be too hard on Martin Flaherty, because I think it was his first county final. I thought he did a decent job up to then. Possibly maybe a bit whistle happy. There was a couple of, but there was nothing. I wouldn't call that. I think it was, if that had happened earlier on in the game, there wouldn't be so much about it. But the fact that it was probably the last attack of the day, that's obviously why there's so much talk about it. And it did bother John O'Mahony because, like you said, Maurice, he went up to the ref afterwards, and it's not something like I've ever seen John O'Mahony do down through the years. He doesn't. He keeps his emotions in check, and even watching him on the sideline this year with Salthill, he's very, very calm. So he's not as animated as he would have been years ago, I would say, with Galway. But I suppose from Salthill's point of view, it's something that they could look back on and say, what if? They certainly had 2 or 3 fellas on the overlap there. They could have even, possibly got in for a goal chance. But I think, but like I said, these are, the thin margins. These things happen in finals, where small little things go against you, and, you just have to deal with it.
Yeah, no, it's definitely something that does happen in finals. It's these, I suppose, tight little margins that play such a factor. I suppose we were touching there towards I suppose, moments towards the end of that final, but just like even early on, if you do consider it, like Salthill obviously race ahead, Maurice, 1-1 to a point after 6 minutes. Then it's a quick enough reply really from Moycullen to stretch back into the lead. Then on 10 minutes, 5 points to 1-1. And I think that's where major credit has to be given to Salthill, because they got into a lead so early, and then they were, I suppose, behind then straight away within such a quick period.
And I would say, Paul, if you were to look at the key metrics for a game like this, Salthill were probably ahead. I actually thought Moycullen started the game kind of sloppy enough, and a couple of their key players weren't really in the game. But the one thing that they do have, I have to say, from watching, I've seen up close to go, but this year, I think Moycullen are an exceptionally well coached team. I think they took apart Montpellier's kick out. They had clearly done a lot of video work on that. They're cheating. They knew the signals. Completely took it apart in the semi-final. Same thing again. The first 5 kickouts, go back to them in this game. They're 1-1 down. You're looking for something, and they just ultra aggressive press. They force the Veld to go long, kicks 3 out over the sideline, 1 breaks for Cook. The only one that they won was their 5th kick out, which Shawnee O'Leiden came out, caught that ball. But until then, they had just dismantled Saltill's kick out. And in a situation like that, I actually think there's probably should be a bit of an onus on. I think when you see that really hyper aggressive press, I know some people don't like doing it, but sometimes I think it's just worth just getting it safe, kicking it off, getting the ball off short, securing possession, because that was Moycullen's avenue back into the game. So you get this really strong lead. Suddenly then Moycullen start pressing ultra aggressive. They themselves actually, they are able to just, as a counterpoint, they're able to work a short kick out. The perfect example is, Desi Keanedy's first point when he punched over the bar. That was a short kick out that went to the corner. It's Zakeen Dean who carried the ball out. He brings the ball to the midfielder. It's this, and then there's ultra aggressive athletic runners that carry the ball forward, and it ends in a hand pass score at the other end. But that's the one thing I would have thought at a moment like that. You're hoping, not hoping, but it would have been nice to see Salthill kind of double down and put the foot in the throat. And I don't know if you remember, Gareth Armstrong had a really good chance just after. It was also identical actually to O'Flaherty's goal. Same thing again, coming on that on his left foot, he dropped it into the goalkeeper's hands. You were nearly hoping for Salthill to take advantage of what was effectively a lull. And they didn't. And the disappointment, I suppose, you talk about regrets for Salthill, and I'm sure they'll have frustrations around that, the advantage at the end. But there are also frustrations around the fact that they close out the first half. Tom O'Connor kicks that point from a free. Their next score is 17 minutes later, the 47th minute, when Shawnee kicks that point.
Yeah, isn't there a free by Cullen there in the second half? I think
that's a killer. That period is an absolute killer. Because you're up, you're playing with the winds. That you kind of have a strong hand here, and so as much as there is a lot of talk about the advantage of that, a period like that is just as costly. And unfortunately, that's there are fine margins, I suppose, that will come against you in a county final.
That's definitely one, Sean Og. Like we were talking there about the advantage, but it's nearly, I suppose, in such a chaotic game where so much went on, you nearly forget about 1 or 2 opportunities and maybe a bit of scoring drought Salthill had in the second half.
Yeah, and in a game that was low scoring, every score is so valuable. And you just reminded me there, Maurice, that free that Tomo had that he missed, that was huge. But it just goes to show, I suppose, the power of the mind. I mean, if there's nothing riding on that free, he'd have probably put it over, because it was well within his range. It was, the right side of the goal for him. Like, he'd have done that, I'd say 9 times out of 10 with his eyes closed. But pressure of a county final, it plays tricks on minds, and unfortunately for him, he missed it. But to be fair to Salthill, like, for a team that hadn't won a county final for 10 years, you wouldn't, like, Salthill don't do inferiority complex, right? That's, they went into that county final expecting to win. They would have played Moycullen a lot at underage and have had the measure of them. A lot of, we'll say, I think there was 5 or 6 players from the UCG, or I don't know what you call them now, NUIG, Sigerson Cup winning team from this year would have, we'll say, been on both teams that went out the last day. So they knew each other very well. So, like, Salthill, like, I work with Sean Armstrong, he's a selector with Salthill, and I texted him Sunday night and just, commiserated with him. And I kind of said to him, it was very nearly the perfect display. There was only 3 or 4 things that you could pick out from their display that wasn't, we said Tomo's free. They played, I suppose, a very near perfect, we'll say, first half. You go 2 points up against the Breeze. Yes, Garage Armstrong's short free. But they nearly pulled it out of the bag. They really did. They showed some, very well coached team as well. The way they set up when they protect the D, and then when they attack, they keep, a fair amount of width. They're 10 and 12, just like you would say the Dublin wing forwards used to do in their pomp. They'd hug the sideline just up and down. But look at, I suppose on the other hand, then Moycullen, they showed great resilience. They didn't play particularly well. They played very well the week before against Mount Bellew. They didn't play very well in the quarterfinal against Clare Galway, but still, great resilience to keep doing, and sticking to the game plan right to the very end. So, and I know you might be asking about this, Paul, in a while, but it'll be interesting now to see how, with the shackles off as such, like, how will they go in the Connacht Club Championship? That'll be very interesting.
Yeah, no, it's definitely fascinating to know how they're going to get on. Lads, just before we do, I suppose, move on, maybe just like, because we have touched a bit on Salthill about how Moycullen did get the job done. If it is wrong if we don't pay tribute to this, but Mars, for me, like, I can't remember a player who's had a good as a Galway Club Championship this year is Robert Finnerty. Like, he's been just a joy to watch, right foot, left foot. Like Robert Finnerty's performances would nearly, I suppose, you're nearly thinking of things Shane Walsh would do. Like, that's the, I suppose, similarity that I play anyways when you look at, like, Finnerty's performances across the championship. Yeah,
I wholeheartedly agree. From the very first day he played us in Cyprus Stadium, played Barna, sorry. He was absolutely excellent that day. I actually, I think I said to you at the time, Paul, I thought that's the score kind of flat Salthill that day, but he was just leading the line and continued to do so for the rest of the year. By all accounts, he did so with a fairly considerable back injury. I think he obviously came off that day, but it sounds like he was carrying that all year, but you wouldn't have known it by his performances. I actually think it's encouraging from a Galway perspective too. There's definitely future for Finnerty maybe on the 45 and the way how he links up play, and that, to be honest, I wouldn't have necessarily seen him in that role before this year, but I definitely think it's worth experimenting with. And the prospect of him in the 40 and Shane and Damien inside is fairly exciting one, I have to say.
Do you think the captain role gave him, I suppose, a bit of responsibility that, like, he kind of wanted?
That's a good question. Yeah, I imagine so. I think he wouldn't have earmarked me. I wouldn't have necessarily thought of him as captain material. He's just such a laid back fella, his demeanor. But then I suppose maybe the maybe what Salthill need is that kind of a calm mind, and he absolutely embodied that. And also, I think the one thing, like his decision making, it's such an underheralded aspect of a footballer. But because sometimes people you'll encourage a guy like a shooter to facilitate other people, and he'll be supposed to be in front of him when he's trying to involve other people. Whereas he always got the balance right. Like if the pass needed to be played, he did the pass. But if he needed to take a chance, he did it too. Like he struck the balance perfectly, and that wasn't just in a county final. Like he did that all year long.
Can I just come in there a second on Robert Finnerty? Years ago, myself and a friend of mine, we used to run this sports camp on the grounds of the school that I teach in. Well, it used to be called St. Mary's College, but anyways, and we used to run it for 4 weeks, and it was Gaelic football, right? And Robert Finnerty and the older brother William, they live about just down the road, just past Wards there, right? And most kids, they would come just for 1 week, but Robert would come for the 4 weeks, right? He'd rock up Monday morning. This is when he was about 11, 12 years of age, right? And he just loved the football, and you could see it even then, that he was just so skillful, so skillful on the ball. And he didn't like losing either. I'll always remember, the way young lads, when they lose, sometimes they cry, right? Well, he was the biggest crier, that I can, one of the biggest I can remember. But it's just interesting to see how he has developed from that to what he is now. And
you did it on at an early age, like when you're seeing him at 11.
Oh, you could, yeah. You're just so comfortable with the ball, but then you see, you just don't know, when a guy gets to 15, 16 years of age, there's other things that go on in their lives. You just don't know, is football going to mean that much to him? And obviously with his dad and all that, it's very important in his life. So, it's just interesting to see how much he has developed. And he is getting better with Galway. I think it's been fairly well documented that we'd say in the final last year against Kerry, and I know we're talking about the county final, but that he was probably hauled off, a bit too soon.
Yeah.
I suppose the talk is that Galway's bench last year probably wasn't the greatest, but even during the match watching it, I was thinking back to, do you remember what Mickey Hart did with Peter Canavan? Took him off, but brought him back on again. I would have thought that, the way the game opened up so much in the last 5-6 minutes, that Robert Finnerty, if you brought him back on, he could have, done something but certainly maybe as an 11, next year for Galway, that could certainly work, because he's very, very comfortable on the ball, and, he's got great vision, and just his dummies as well. When he has the ball, the guy, the cornerback or whoever's marking him, thinks he has him snared, and then he just sidestep again, and he's a lovely player to watch.
Just with Moycullen, obviously turned it around in that second half. In the end, just winning by the minimum. A couple of players, I suppose, that did interviews for Moycullen after the game, Sean Og, it was referenced we just went back to basics. We weren't happy with what we were doing in the first half. Do you think it was solely that, or was there something in particular for you Moycullen done differently in that second half?
Well, I think the big, now I wouldn't be, how should we say, what I'd call a great X's and O's man, as in tactics and all that. But for the first 20 minutes, Tomo and Robert Finnerty were left 1v1 or 2v2, and there was no sweeper in front of them. And, they were causing Moycullen lots of bother. Don Connellan then made the decision for the last 10 minutes of the first half and for the entire second half to play Sean Kelly in front of, the two lads that were marking Tomo and Robert. and that made a big difference. And I think as well in the second half, Owen Kelly went to mark Robert Finnerty. Now, Owen Kelly is another, interesting story. And again, I'll just take you back maybe about 7 or 8 years. He sat in my leaving cert biology class for 2 years, right? And I was, I suppose, in charge of the St. Mary's football team, right? And we'd say Sean was playing, and Paul was a bit too young at the time, but I kept going on to Sean. I says, does your brother Owen play? And he says, no, he's no interest in Gaelic football. So I'd keep asking him. I said, will you come out and play? No, I don't. I have no interest, right? You see, he was on to basketball, and he went to America on a 4-year basketball scholarship. And it was only when he came back, I think about 3 years ago, that he actually took up Gaelic football. So, he actually is another guy that could be really, really good for Galway next year, because if he has the ability, which he showed the last day, of negating Robert Finnerty, because Robert was much quieter in the second half, I felt, when compared to the first half. Well, that shows that he's got huge potential. But that was another move in the second half I felt that made a big difference, putting Owen Kelly directly on Robert Finnerty and having Sean, we'd say, sweeping up back there. And he has that wonderful ability, whilst he's sweeping back there, to also contribute to, to the team in an attacking sense. So he was continuously, driving out with the ball and just providing that leadership. And I think it is something that simple that was said at halftime. I mean, like yourself, Paul, I read in the papers that, the battle cry at halftime was, let's just get back to basics. Let's refocus. Let's do the simple things right. And let's see where that brings us. But like we said earlier, they did rely on a small bit of luck to finally get them over the line.
Did you see anything different from him in the second half? It's a great point Sean touches there about Owen Kelly and how he had no interest in playing football, and now the transformation this year, Maurice, because throughout this championship, Owen Kelly's brought been such key man marker for Moycullen.
Yeah, it's funny. I obviously from my day job at the 42, I covered NUIG's Sigerson team this year a good bit, and I met a man from a neighbouring club here in Galway who was be watching football all over the country. I mean, this man knows his football, and he said to me, this must have been December or January, lads. Owen Kelly is the best footballer in Galway, not in the county squad. And I've been speaking to people in Moycullen about Owen Kelly, and they said, he can't really kick, he can't really pass, but he's a phenomenal athlete. But he just saw it in him, and I actually remember that day they bet at UL in the final, and he was, Mulcahy got a lot of praise that day for the job he did on Clifford. Kelly was phenomenal that day. He was phenomenal. Donald Sullivan had been unbelievable for UL all year, and he just put the clampers on him, followed him stride for stride everywhere, totally took him out of the game. In terms of what, that was a fairly pivotal point. I actually saw an interview Moycullen put up on Facebook that Sean Kelly said that as soon as Owen was told that he was put on Robert Finnerty, he asked Sean to come on front of him. So it wasn't just one Kelly had to deal with, it was two, which is no mean feat. But yeah, the other luxury, and this is a serious luxury to have, is to be able to spring someone like Aidan Claffey at halftime. I'm a huge fan of his. I just think he's an absolute titan of a little cornerback if he wanted to be, but he's also a very versatile footballer. He's well able to get forward, and he's got huge pace, so he kind of has it all. And a change like that is fairly pivotal. The other thing I would say as well, Sean made a great point earlier about the mental pressure of a county final and what that maybe can do to a player. And you look at the goal, and we're talking about these are two relatively young squads, but you look at the goal that Moycullen concede, and what's the next thing that happens? And it's Dave Wynne goes, demands the short kick out, drives up the field. He's involved twice in that attack, and that ends in a Sean Kelly point. And that was just the perfect response. He took on that mantle. A couple of minutes later, it ended in such a score, but he had a brilliant shoulder on Donald Hunt to dispossess him. Corcoran, I think, played the ball on the ground after that and gave away a free. But with players like that, Paul, they're worth their weight in gold in situations like that, when you just want someone to come forward, grab the game by the mantle. That bit of experience, he's been there before. He's been in with Galway setups. He's kind of has that experience. He came up and kicked the great point as well. So players like that really came to the fore. And just to go back to, I know we moved on from Salthill, but experience like this will stand to Salthill. You know, that experience like that will only take this team on. Like they're going nowhere.
And even you were saying there, Mars, like Aidan Claffey, but Sean, like just players, I suppose, that obviously have transferred to this Moycullen club, that there's no doubt about it. They've benefited it, like Owen Gallagher, man of the match performance last day. Like Tom Clark probably won't get the praise he deserves, but like he ran himself into the ground. Neil Walsh, who came in from Leitrim, has brought it. But like then to from the Moycullen underage ranks to bring players through, like someone there like the last day who probably isn't going to get the praise he deserves, like Michael Mahan at wing back, his first year in senior football, and the same for Conor Corcoran as well.
Well, I suppose you're on there about we'll say the few blow-ins that Moycullen have, and I do know that we'll say initially maybe two, you know, because I'd have friends from Moycullen, you know, would say traditional Moycullen J people, that some people may not have been, you know, hugely enamored with the fact that, you know, there was guys coming into the club that weren't probably even living in the parish. But I think when they won 2 years ago, that was all forgotten. But their underage then, you know, feeds nicely into the whole setup, and the fact that it's a growing parish as well. I mean, you know, in Galway, they say like that Moycullen and we'll say Clare Galway, and out here in Ormore, that, you know, those parishes are really exploding now. So like the ingredients or the recipe for success is there in Moycullen. You know, you have you know, it's a very traditional, you know, it still has that country GA, you know, feel to it, whilst it's an exploding parish. You've got, you know, a couple of fellas like Gallagher, like Clark, you know, who have added to the mix as well. And, you know, you mentioned the underage there as well. I mean, the last day, and even against Mount Bellew, you know, your man James McLaughlin, I mean, he has to come into the mix as well. And I think he is, well, from what you can read, I think he will be fit enough for, you know, if they do go some ways in the Connacht Club Championship. And, you know, what an addition he will be. And then, you know, I was out in Russmuck on Saturday morning, the day before the county final. Moycullen won the Westboard Minor A title. And there was a young lad there, Charlie Cox. He came on for Galway in the minor final. I mean, he just destroyed Ormore in his own leg. So, you know, Moycullen is I suppose, you know, a growing giant, and it's up to the rest of us to try and, you know, make life difficult for them.
Yeah, and with that, like Daniel, I suppose you mentioned Charlie Cox, Daniel Cox as well. Like, it would have been Galway minor a few years ago. He seemed to have struggled with injury, but like it's definitely something that they probably do hold an advantage over clubs in Galway. I know it was so tight the last day, but it's still like, if you look at that Moycullen panel, Mars, it is a scary prospect.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, you just think about someone like the addition of someone like James McLaughlin in itself is kind of a frightening prospect. They're only going to get better. I don't know about G-Lads, there's a bit of soft talk here about maybe another high profile transfer coming from the Midlands next year. So they really are going to kick on. I think this could be the start of force. I know you mentioned it earlier, but I'd be really interested to see how they go in Connacht now, because there's a huge opportunity there for whoever wants it. You've got a lot of first time winners, a lot of the kind of heavyweights out of it. Turtleshire on the other side of the draw. So you've got there's a good path, a really strong path for a team who kind of wants to stake claim for a contract. And as much as you could say it's Moycullen's first run, they did win a county title in 2020. I can imagine there was a bit of frustration about not actually getting a provincial run then. So I'd be very curious to see how they go against Westport now.
The way the Connacht draw set up, Moycullen versus Westport, and the winner plays Roscommon county champions, Strokestown, and then you have St. Kieran's from London playing St. Mary's, and the winner of that plays Tullastrand in the semi. Sean, just even, I suppose, when you said there, like early on, that you'd be interested to see how Moycullen will get on in Connacht. Like, I suppose with Carroll back in the day, you would have won a county title experience. Connacht, like, as your first time in it, like, what's that kind of experience like?
Yeah, to be honest, would say when Carrow won the county title in '96, because it was such a huge thing for us, it was very, very well. It was nearly impossible to, because we turned around. I think it was a 7-day turnaround before we played Clonagale in the Connacht Club semi-final. So there was only 2 points in it, 12-10, but it was very, very difficult to focus on that game coming from where we did. And as well as that, the club championship now is a much bigger monster than it was back then, even though it was important back then, but it's there's a lot more publicity about it now. Most of the big games are live on TV, and there's big crowds at them. So I would imagine that Moycullen will really want to give Sunday week a go against Westport. The break of 2 weeks is just perfect. They can have their celebrations, which is important, but at the same time, they'll see this as an opportunity. It's not the easiest draw, but the good news is that Westport are in exactly the same position, or probably in a worse position, in the sense that it's their first ever Mayo County title. So, they're going to have to deal with, the celebrations and all of that. But if one was to look at history, I think it was 2007, Moycullen won the intermediate championship in Galway, and they went on to win the All-Ireland intermediate football title. So, and there are some, would you believe it, players that are on the panel now that played back then. And I'm thinking of, he didn't come on the last day, but Conor Bohan. I think he would have been listed as a sub the last day. So, they're not afraid of, going on and representing, Moycullen on the national stage. They won't have any inferiority complex. And an interesting thing that I read today, I thought it was, Sean Kelly, every single competition that he has entered this year as a player, he's got to the final of. So think about that now, right? All-Ireland Senior Football, FBD, Division 2 of the National League, County Final, Sigerson final, Connacht final, so it's written in the stars, like, so, so, look at, if you could see out the year, he just has one more competition to play in, which, say, if they get to a final, it'll be next year, but, it'll be interesting to see. I'll certainly be watching that game Sunday week.
It's a really interesting statistic there, Maurice. I suppose you could say for probably Paul Kelly as well. I know Owen Kelly got drafted in probably into the Galway panel probably after the FBD, so hasn't been in every final, but there's definitely been 2 of the Kellys that have been in every final.
Yeah, it doesn't seem to hold him back either. I really hope that Moycullen kind of let him loose against Westport and don't maybe send him in. I've seen a good bit of Westport this year just through work, and they're, like, on paper they're a very impressive team, but I never, like, I would say they're a bit more conservative maybe than you might think just looking at them on paper. They've got some very good forwards. The other McLaughlin, Oisin McLaughlin, he looks exactly like his brother, only he's actually got a bit of finishing about him as well, which is kind of frightening prospect. And then you got Phil McDonough, who has been a decent player for me over the couple of years, but he's been great for Westport this year. But I kind of hope that they let Sean Kelly loose and let Westport send somebody after him. Like, I would love to see, for example, Sean Kelly start at centre forward, and do Westport have to change up and bring Lee Keegan, who's been playing midfield for him, back to centre back and try and do a job on him. So I hope McCullough go out and try and go out in the front foot, and particularly the 3 Kellys, there's no better men to do it. You could easily send on after Oisin McLaughlin on the wing, let them worry about what it'd probably be. Owen McLaughlin probably go after Paul, and let Sean Kelly centre forward. And I think the only pair Westport have of capable of quieting him would be Lee Keegan.
And it's like, as you mentioned there, Maurice, like, when you're just listing out some of the names, like, it could really be the game of the Connacht Championship, because, like, you're thinking more than likely whoever wins that should win Connacht out.
Yeah, I think so, definitely. You'd be surprised. Mayo clubs actually don't have as good a record in Connacht as you think. Like you go back to 2015 is the last time in Mayo Club, I think. Like Aspar won it that year, I think. Don't quote me on that. That you've seen Mayo Clubs, but they're generally they actually haven't had a stronger record. So I'm picking when you've got first time winners. That's a big thing, I think, this year. You know, you mentioned Stroketown and the way they finished, they ended as well. So a lot of these teams are going to be coming off the back of I don't know. Paul, you might be. I don't think you would be, Sean. But if anybody's on Instagram, they saw the celebrations in Westport this week. They seem to be fairly raucous. So I can look at they deserve to enjoy it too. But there's definitely a huge window here for either of these teams, depending on how Sunday week goes.
There was a sense as well, Sean, like before we finish, like at the end of that game, there seemed to be like, I suppose, for some Galway supporters that they were happy for Moycullen in one sense, but then I suppose when Peter Cook misses out on the county title in 2020 from being stateside, he was obviously delighted for his club mates, but to miss out on the first title, I'd say there was a bit of devastation there for him, but he won't admit it either. But for him to like punch that ball then to the net and win the county title, and even as Owen Gallagher was saying on the interview about Peter Cook, like the hand of God, like lifting his hand up in the air.
I know, yeah. Well, it's a real fairy tale story. Yeah, like no matter what Peter Cook says, you know, he had to have been fairly devastated to have missed out on 2 years ago. I think that said, I think the win 2 years ago was a bit diluted by the fact that, you know, it was COVID and all that. So, you know, the final, the last day, you know, the fact that there was crowds there, like I'm sure it, and, you know, brought him some sort of closure, that type of thing. But from what my sources tell me, I think he will be available for Galway next year, which will be, you know, a big addition, especially if, you know, Liam Silk is gone, and you know, I don't know, there's rumours about Damien Comer travelling, but I'm sure he might be back for the championship. But certainly, you know, I just go back to this camp that we used to run. We had Peter Cook working for us for one particular week there about 3 or 4 years ago, and I have to say, like, that you wouldn't meet a nicer guy. You know, very grounded. I think the only reason he didn't play with Galway, we'd say, in the last couple of years was just, I think he wanted to maybe give attention to other parts of his life, you know, we'd say his career, that type of thing, which is very understandable. And to further that, he had to travel to America. But, you know, having seen probably Galway in the All-Ireland final last July, you know, I'm sure it gave him a kind of an itch maybe to get back into it. But certainly I would say that he enjoyed, we'd say, Sunday night, Monday, and whether they went on to Tuesday or not, I don't know. But I'd say they did. But no, I was delighted for him, like, you know.
I know, like it was remarkable scenes, like when you consider all of that, Maurice.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, cards on the table. I played with Peter in the Bish. He would have done the same thing we grown up. So you'd be over the moon from. I think the way this year felt was just difficult. You know, he went traveling with his partner. They decided to come back early, but it was you know, they came back prematurely. Sorry, but it was mid-season for Galway. They didn't necessarily fit. But if the capability is there, and the thing is, Paul, you go back to, we've referenced a couple of now, but you go back to the All-Ireland final and maybe how Conroy tired, and you know, Galway just seemed to be crying out for maybe a bit more of a physical presence around the middle. And Peter's just perfect for that. Like, you know, he can do that perfectly. He's actually added a couple of elements to his game. I know it didn't quite click in the county final, but I've been really impressed with how accurate he's been striking off the ground this year. So he would be a huge addition if fingers crossed he's back in with Galway next year.
And just on that, because like the county final itself was a spectacular game, as we mentioned, but like there's always going to be people, I suppose, fascinated now of like who can get the Galway call and who's going to be in there at the start of the year. But like, I thought it was just fantastic over the weekend as well, Maurice. Like Evan Murphy's players had unbelievable underage talent, but like it's just really been hampered by injuries.
Yeah.
And like he put in a performance that he's definitely kind of saying to Paor Joyce like that he's available starting next year.
Yeah, I think so. I think there's a lot of there's a couple of those kind of not fairy tale stories, but a couple of nice redemption arcs. I wouldn't be one bit surprised if John Maher gets a phone call after the club form he's had this year. I think he's been like he's eat up the dirty work that maybe Salthill could use slightly more of, and that's actually just to circle back to the final. One thing I was kind of noticing, I don't know if you remember, Salthill maybe went in at half time against Annadown slightly flat, and maybe Annadown kind of got up them, and they made 2 changes at half time. Brought on Donald Hunt, brought off Paddy Kitt, I think was playing way forward that day, and they waited until the 44th minute to make a change in the county final. I think those kind of changes have a big impact. Same, you could actually say the same thing end up costing Galway in an Ireland final, maybe not having that impact off the bench. But sorry, just to circle back to your question. Yeah, I think John Maher will definitely get a call. I think Evan Murphy has demonstrated, well, his pedigree was kind of proven beforehand, maybe that he was capable of this. He just needed to get a run of games, I would say, actually, in terms of a consistent run, an injury-free spell. I wouldn't be surprised if Conor Corcoran, maybe, if they have a look at him as well. He's been really sticky this year. So yeah, there's a few hopefuls and a few probables from the final and both from the year as well, actually.
Anyone else caught the eye for you, Sean Oak, throughout the championship?
We'll say the last day, I'd agree with Maurice there. Just on John Maher, he had been in on the panel with Paor. I know about 2 years ago. I think he played
the COVID game against Mayo.
Yeah, the hammering. That was his only game. Yeah, when they got out in Tuam, when they got cut open. Yeah.
Yeah, I think. Yeah, and I think he was taken off at halftime. We'd say in that game, but okay, it's one thing looking at a county final and looking at potential guys for senior inter-county setup, but there is such a big I would say gap between, we'll say, the county final level and kind of the business end of senior inter-county championship. Certainly Evan Murphy, he's done it for Galway at minor level. He played minor, I think, for 2 years in a row. Very, very skillful on the ball. I think he dabbled in soccer for a while, and I think it was his cruciate that he did. But certainly, I saw Salthill in the semi-final against, quarter-final against Tuam in Tuam Stadium. And he came in at half-time and he made a big difference when Robert Finnerty went off injured. But there's a couple of the Moycullen players, the cornerback there. What's his name?
Mulcahy.
Mulcahy and isn't it Corcoran as well?
Conor Corcoran, yeah.
Yeah, they were lively enough, but it's not like we'd say my day where you can bring a guy who's played well in the club championship and then just suddenly parachute him in at county level. There's the whole world of conditioning and all that. They have to, and that takes years. So, certainly, the age profile of the two teams that participated in the final the last day, they're young enough. And do you know what, the thought crossed my mind as well, everybody's on about Robert Finnerty, but his older brother, William, he's a tidy kind of a cornerback, and he's a guy that's never, mentioned when these conversations happen, but he's and the other Salthill cornerback as well, Fadden. I mean, Owen McFadden. He played in on the same minor team as Desi Keneally the year David Clifford got the goal in the second half to beat them. There was a wet All-Ireland final. He has inter-county pedigree, so he's a guy that possibly could be looked at. And another guy, I think, that they should certainly look at, especially considering that Liam Silk, we may not see him again, but Owen Kern from obviously Annadown.
Annadown, yeah.
I mean, I just like his attitude on the pitch. He just doesn't take any. He's not going to score a top corner goal for you, but just his whole attitude. I think if that could be harnessed, I know as far as I'm aware, he didn't play with Annadown this year until we'll say their last match against
Salthill,
against Salthill in the semi-final. Yeah. So he's a guy, if he was willing to come back, because I'm sure he's kept in shape. He's a guy that could be looked at.
And just before we do finish, like, is there anyone else that stood out for you, Mars? Like, even when you consider, I suppose, the two teams that weren't in the final as well.
I like to look at Nathan Granger from Claregalway. I think he could be worth to go. Just, I not that I would be critical of what Galway have in that position, but I think the final were probably defined by, not defined, but there was featured by goalkeeper mistakes. And a player who just reminded me again of how good he's been this year is Dara Farquharson. I just think like his shot stability was unbelievable. His kickouts are very good. I definitely think he's worth consideration. Declan Potter, I think, has been good. So there's a few, right? Yeah, Paul. Just to go back to what Sean said, like that's a great point in terms of the reason I actually think Owen Kelly is more likely to have an impact than maybe some other more skillful footballers is because of the athletic potential he has already there. Like it's inbuilt. He has the conditioning athletic framework is there from what he did in the States coming back. So I actually think he's more likely, the way intercounty football is right now, he's more likely to have an immediate impact next year versus some of these players we're talking about now. It might be 2 or 3 years before we see them, kick on the intercounty scene.
Yeah, no, it's definitely going to be. I suppose he's going to get a squad because we're assembling that squad soon, because I think it's the 2nd or 3rd week in November they're allowed to officially be back training.
And sorry for cutting across you there, Paul, but we haven't mentioned would say the goalkeeping situation at all. The county final the last day was defined by, I suppose, 2 goals that you could kind of point the finger at both goalies and say, you could have done better there. But has any goalie put up his hand in the Galway senior football or even intermediate or junior that might challenge, we'll say, Conor Gleeson? Because I think, despite all his attributes, I'm sure, there are areas that he could, I suppose, improve on. I mean, we all saw the game against Armagh, but there was talks of like Owen Kern, Rory Lavelle, possibly getting a call back, but I don't know whether that'll happen now after last Sunday. But I'm going to say something controversial now, but I think the best goalkeeper in Galway is actually an Ormore Mary man, a guy called Conor Carroll. He was in goal for the Sigerson winning team this year, and he did play underage for Galway, but for whatever reason he transferred to Roscommon, and he's sub-keeper on the Roscommon senior football team.
Yeah, that's right.
But if I was Pádraig Joyce, he'd be the man that I'd be ringing.
That'd be fascinating now to see. Could we swoop from the Rossies?
Well, he's Galway born and bred.
Yeah.
He's like his uncle is the chairman of the Roscommon County Board.
Okay.
So that's why, that's the connection there. But I've seen him play at intermediate level. You've probably seen him in the Sigerson. He's as solid as a rock. His kick out is it's like cream. It's just, lovely trajectory on it and lovely to catch, I'd imagine.
It'd be fascinating to see if we could swoop him in, but we'll definitely have to keep our eye on that one. But that's all on our show for today. We'll be speaking with a couple of Moycullen and Dunmore McHale's players over the weekend in the lead up to their Connacht Championship games. But lads, thanks a million for your time.
Thanks, Paul.
Thanks, lads.